All right, let's go ahead and get started. If you can make sure you're on mute so our presenters can present, and we'll go ahead and get started. And I will pass it along to our CAIS co-chairs, Marquita Grino-Shire and Don Cardinal.
Well, good afternoon, colleagues. It is great to see some familiar faces and some new faces. It is my pleasure to get us started. The steering committee really hopes this will be a conversation, but to make sure everyone is on the same page, we're going to just do a little history lesson here and talk about CAIS, which is the California Alliance for Inclusive Schooling. I was going back and looking at some notes, and we actually began this conversation the summer of 2018, which seems crazy to me that we're 2 years into this work now, and this time has gone by so quickly. We began this work to focus on developing and sharing practices related to inclusive schooling for all students in California. And we began to think about how we might work across disciplines and across PK-12 and higher education to ensure high quality teacher preparation. And now we have a new focus on educator preparation, which I'm so excited about. And I'm gonna do a shout out to Linda Blanton, who's a colleague that I worked with years ago, and I'm so glad she's joining our work now. So at the time, it seemed back in the summer of 2018, it seemed like the stars were aligning, that there were these policy and practice changes that were happening that brought a group of individuals together to think together about how we might move this goal towards more inclusive schooling for all students. So you see on the side what our purpose is, and we have been working for the last 2 years to achieve that purpose and to realize that purpose in several different ways. Audrey, next slide, please. So here's our planning committee. I have the great fortune to work with some outstanding colleagues, and I want to name them just really briefly. So I serve as the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Educator Preparation and Public School Programs at the Office of the Chancellor, the California State University. And I am co-chair along with Don Cardinal from the Thompson Policy Institute. Don was formerly Dean of the College of Education at Chapman and continues to serve a critical leadership role for the California Alliance. We are joined by Paul Sindelar, our partner from CEDAR, the University of Florida, which is a federally funded technical assistance center. Audrey Gomez is also with the Thompson Policy Institute at Chapman University. We have Mary Vixie Sandy, who is the Executive Director for the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. Vicki Graff, who represents LMU, but also the California Association of Professors of Special Education, Teacher Education. Barbara Murchison is not able to join us today, but she represents the California Department of Education. Kristen Wright, formerly of the CDE, is now with the Sacramento County Office of Education, and we're so pleased that she continues as a member of the steering committee. And then we have Christine Olmstead from the Orange County Department of Education and our champion with California MTSS. And then finally, Virginia Kennedy serves as a representative for the California Council on Teacher Education and was the former president, and she continues to work closely alongside of us. Next slide. You're up, Don, I think.
Hello, everyone. I want to start off. I know Marquita is going to worry I'm going to take a little side trip here. You know, I'm so privileged that I get to pretty much do in work what I want to do. And one of the lessons that I've learned in life is don't waste your time with people that just want to be negative or people that get so ego involved that the process becomes part of them. So in my adult life, I've really sought out organizations and people who really want common good, who truly believe that we can make this a better world, we can make it a more inclusive world. And when Marquita and I start talking about this group, we said, because if you really wonder why people are on it, we found those people that are positive thinkers, that are truly, deeply, personally, and professionally dedicated to making this a better world, a more inclusive world. And that's really where CAIS came from. So I'm going to talk about a few things we did, just in case you may be new to CAIS. But the good news is you get to hear many more throughout the next hour or so. Even some of the new items that we haven't fully announced yet. So this year, CAIS became an associated organization with Cal Council, and that's another great honor because Cal Council, we believe, is also one of those organizations that not ego-centered, not here to prove anything, just to really make this a better world. And partnering with them has just been great. We did a sponsored poster session in the fall. That was in a year ago now, I guess, right? In San Diego, where we had our mini grant recipients, which we'll talk about in a little, share their findings. This is also something else we just really loved. It's not just the alcohol and the food in the room, but well, that was great too. But face-to-face engagement with people who have, for a modest amount of money, did just tremendous work, and immediately willing to share that work with all their colleagues. We hope to do that again as soon as we get back in person, and we have some ideas. Actually, Marquita has some ideas she may share with you in that area as well. Our website keeps evolving. If you haven't been there, please go to www.inclusioncalifornia.org. inclusioncalifornia.org. It's really kind of our home base. We keep adding more things. You'll see webinars, really a lot going on, and it's going to change a lot more, so keep looking. Now, we mentioned the mini grants. In conjunction with CEDAR and the CSU, our partners, we created and administered a $100,000 mini grant. $100,000 may sound like a lot to you, but in the state of California, it's nothing. When I think what we were able to do with the 8 recipients of those monies we're able to do in just 1 year, it blows me away. I hope California can continue. I hope we can help continue that process. And now I'd like to start with all of these new ideas that we have, and start with Marquita talking about the Gates Transformation Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. When I was looking at this slide, I think it should say fall 2019 is when we had the poster session. I wish we were having it again this fall.
I'll take care of that as soon as this is over.
We will. So I'm pleased to share some good news, and I see that our colleague Ryan Borden from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is joining us today. So I want to thank Ryan for her thoughtful partnership. We began a conversation in the spring about how we might transform what we're doing in the CSU related to educator preparation. And she suggested that we join the Gates effort to transform educator preparation. And across the country, there are a dozen or so, I believe, transformational teacher preparation centers. So in conversations with my leadership team and with Ryan, what we came to was that the CSU has been engaging in teacher preparation, transformation, and reform for about the last 5 years with our New Generation of Educators initiative, which was supported by the SD Bechtel Jr. Foundation. And so we wrote a planning proposal that Ryan and her team reviewed, and we are very pleased that we recently were informed that we were awarded the planning proposal to begin to think about using this NGEI work and 5 key transformational elements as a driver to strengthen our work related to recruiting, preparing, and graduating and retaining teachers of color, which is a strategic goal within our system. So our leadership team will begin this work in January. And I hope in the spring we'll have some more information to share about this new transformational center. So let me turn it over to Don now, who is also going to share some good news related to the Gates Foundation.
This is going to be Megan Kosher.
Oh.
Dr. Kosher, take it.
All right. We are also had the opportunity to apply for, at the Thompson Policy Institute, apply for a planning grant for a transformation center. As you can see here, we have I'm going to call it a logo, and Don will let me know what the I can never think of that one word.
Design element.
Design element. This is our design element. We're going by the California Educator Preparation Innovation Center. We're so excited about this work and planning a transformation center in California with a focus on inclusive education. We're just getting started. We have a number of we're grateful to have a number of wonderful partners, including Orange County Department of Education and their expertise in MTSS. And so again, just getting started, but really looking forward to updating everyone as we continue to develop out the center. Don, Audrey, anything I missed about that? Anything else you'd like to add about that piece?
No, other than we're pumped, and the good news is we're working real closely with our CSU partners, with Marquette Shire, and that alone is part of. Try to go again. That alone is part of the collaboration, the real meaningful collaboration that exists between two partners, not competition, but really focused on assisting California.
I was just going to say that, Don. Ditto.
Thank you, Megan. I'll hand it over to Paul Sindelar, who will give us a little bit update on the preparation subcommittee. You're on mute, Paul.
Sorry about that. Vicki Graff and I co-chaired a planning team, which was charged with developing an agenda for the preparation subcommittee. And we were to report back to the steering committee at the spring meeting, which we did, although there was no spring meeting and very little fanfare about the report. One of our recommendations and the most concrete of the recommendations had to do with actually constituting the committee, finding leadership and identifying members. And at the last steering committee, Vicki agreed to chair the preparation subcommittee. Virginia Kennedy agreed to co-chair the subcommittee. And today at the steering committee meeting, we proposed a membership of 8 additional participants to represent the CSUs and privates and the university system, as well as, fingers crossed on this one, and LEA preparation programs. And what we're in the process, or what we would like to do right now, is to recruit people who would be interested in serving on this committee. The committee eventually will use the report to identify an agenda that it will undertake under the guidance of the steering committee. Right now, what we're looking for is individuals who would like to participate on this committee. And I'm going to post in the chat box URL that'll take you, with any luck. This is something I created on my own, so fingers crossed on this one. It'll take you to a sign-up sheet, and you can either nominate yourself, and you'll see it's very simple. Put your name down, your institution, and an email address. Nominate a colleague. And in addition to getting representatives from the CSU and the privates and the university system, we're also looking for diversity in academic disciplines, geographic, racial, and ethnic diversity. So we'll have we hope, a long list of people, and we'll try to use those names to satisfy all of these stipulations regarding representation. So I'm going to post it right now. I'm going to ask Vicki if there's anything else that we should be mentioning at this point. Why don't you go ahead and do that?
No, well, thank you, Paul. No, I'm very excited about the launch of the preparation subcommittee, and I think it's another collaboration between the private universities and the CSUs. So between Virginia Kennedy and myself. So really looking forward to having people volunteer. We will have rotating terms so that we can keep people on the committee and then replenish as we go forward. But we also want to make sure that we have, so Paul has just put it into the chat there, so you can sign up and you can nominate people, or you can self-nominate yourself, which would be great. But we're also looking for the universities in the rural areas as well as in the urban areas and so forth. But it is a small group of just about 8. And so we'll look forward to getting lots of nominations. And I'm going to put my email in the chat also, because if you have any specific questions about it, or for whatever reason you think of somebody later, you're more than welcome to email me directly. So here's my email as well, and we'll go from there. So thanks, Paul.
Any questions about the preparation subcommittee? Well, there's one other item.
I don't have a question, but may I make a comment?
Please.
One of the things we didn't do in this overview, and I think there are some new people here, is CAIS has 3 subcommittees. One is preparation, one is policy, and one is practice. So the preparation subcommittee has made the most progress, I think, in terms of developing a structure to do the work. But I just wanted to highlight for new folks who are with us today that we have 2 additional subcommittees. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I'm going to make an announcement about a 3rd additional subcommittee focused on inclusive leadership. And this is a group that's meeting for the first time tonight during the breakout session. We have a leadership team representing CEDAR, that's Chuck Flores from Cal State LA. You saw Chuck earlier on the call. Audrey Gomez from Chapman and from CAIS, and Kristen Wright, now from the Sacramento County Office of Education. That's the leadership team. And the interesting and good news about this group is that we applied for CEDAR support and got a little nest egg, some capital to work with. Once an agenda is identified, we'll be able to support some initiatives with money that we've gotten from CEDAR. And if you're at all interested in participating in the Inclusive Leadership Subcommittee, please join us at the breakout session at the end of this meeting.
Thank
Chuck,
you.
Kristen, Audrey, is there anything else? Linda Blanton, by the way, also my CEDAR colleague, is working with this team. Is there anything else we should mention at this point?
I have the link if you want to join the breakout sessions. We'll be going into breakout sessions approximately about 5:30, so please sign up. There's 2 breakout sessions, and one is on the CAIS Inclusive Leadership Committee. Paul, do you want to also give the announcement of the virtual workshop for the CAMTSS?
It's probably a little premature, but one of the other initiatives we got funding for from CEDAR was to do virtually the workshop we were scheduled to do at the CAMTSS conference this summer. That planning has only just started. There'll be more information about that workshop available. For those of you who have never participated or never even heard of these workshops, what we do is bring together faculty teams and use CEDAR tools, innovation configurations, and course enhancement modules to allow you to bring your preparation curriculum content up to date and complete. So there'll be more information about that. I saw Christine on earlier. Christine, you'll be happy to know we met with Rhonda and had a great session. She walked us through your modules, and they're really very impressive. That's another part of the work too. We're going to be working on a set of modules for the CAMTSS website. So stay tuned. We'll have more on that, I hope, in the very near future.
Thanks, Paul. So a few more things, and Marquita mentioned this first one. We do have 3 standing subcommittees. And then again, Paul just mentioned a 4th one on inclusive leadership. The 3 CAIS subcommittees focuses on preparation, policy, and practice. They're at 3 different conferences. As you can see here, the fall conference, we focus on preparation, and the CCTE, the SPAN conference, we focus on policy. And then the California MTSS conference, we focus on practice. Secondly, CAIS in collaboration with Swift Education Center at the University of Kansas and the Cedar Center at the University of Florida received a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation grant for technical assistance with the California residency labs. And we supported the residency teams in incorporating research-based best practices. And then once COVID hit, we had to quickly pivot and identify ways to continue to support teacher preparation programs and those in those pre-service educators. So CAIS came together with its state and national organizations, specifically Orange County Department of Education and the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, offer what we called was the Active Education Webinar Series. And we provided multiple webinars on topics on universal design for learning, differentiation, MTSS, CalTPAs, culturally and linguistically relevant instruction. And then on Monday, we have a webinar on restorative practices. So, and those have been overwhelmingly, we've had great and positive results. We were thankful to work with Commission so closely that we were able to offer additional supports and extension activities where those who were in those pre-service educators were still able to obtain clinical hours by doing these, attending the webinars and doing extension work. So we are appreciative to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for supporting this work in addition to our state and national partners. Again, as Dr. Cardinal indicated at the start of this meeting, our website is continually being updated. We invite you to visit us at inclusioncalifornia.org or email us at tpi@chapman.edu. And this is actually a picture at the last California MTSS conference that was actually in person. So we're hoping in 2021 that could be and we can update that picture. So now I'm going to hand it over to my colleagues, Marquita Greno-Shire and Mary Vixie Sandy.
Audrey, may I interrupt? I'm Marquita and Mary. I'm sorry, but we're getting some feedback in the chat room that my Google Doc isn't working. Apparently people can get there, but they can't sign up. Oh man, I was so close. I apologize for that. And if you would, if you're interested in serving on that preparation subcommittee, if you would just leave your name and institutional affiliation in the chat box, or if you're interested in nominating someone to serve on that committee, if you could do the same, we'll have to do it that way. And I'm sorry, I'm not a Google Doc guru, as I'm proving day after day. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey, and thank you, Paul. When the steering committee was putting together the agenda for our fall CAIS meeting, the topic of clinical preparation was front and center in terms of what we thought would be useful for our colleagues to hear about the work that we've done, but also to have a conversation about what's happening in the field. And I know at CCTE there's going to be multiple conversations related to that. So Mary and I put our heads together and we wanted to share some of our thoughts about what happened in the spring, our response, and where we are here in the fall, and then to get you thinking about how we might reimagine clinical practice moving forward. So I'm going to start off, and I want to acknowledge the heavy lift that our faculty did, and our candidates did, and our K-12 education partners did in transitioning and pivoting to virtual learning almost overnight. I mean, all of you are either in the schools doing that work yourselves or know colleagues or friends or family members who really are our champions and our heroes who put student success at the forefront and made these incredible changes. And I know in the CSU, our faculty converted about 4,000 classes to online instruction. It seemed overnight. I know it wasn't. I know it happened over the course of a couple of weeks. And then this summer, our faculty engaged in professional development to increase their capacity to deliver instruction to our students well. And I know that that has happened with our K-12 partners too. So I just want to start there by saying thank you to all those champions who were able to do that. The other, by way of introduction, is the Commission on Teacher Credentialing worked alongside us shoulder to shoulder in this work as we thought about, okay, now we've converted courses to virtual forms. What are we going to do with clinical practice and teaching performance assessments? And so early on, Terry Clark brought together a professional leaders group representing all the segments and our LEA partners. And they began meeting on a weekly basis every Tuesday at 11:30, I think. And they met for, Mary, help me here, I want to say 6 or 8 weeks to hear from the field what were the challenges and the barriers and the opportunities to ensure that our candidates continue to have high quality clinical experience in this new normal. And so that group made some recommendations that were approved by the commission and that have set the stage for what we're doing this fall. The other, again, by way of introduction, I just want to give a shout out to Mary and her team who did some incredible behind the scenes work with the governor and other legislative staff, which resulted in an executive order for the field. And so with that, I think I'll pitch it to my colleague and dear friend, Mary. Mary, you're muted.
Thank you, Marquita. I was just saying it's been a very different kind of year than I thought it was going to be. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but it was 2020. Okay? You know, I mean, I was playing off that metaphor. We were going to do all kind of good things this year, and then oops, there's a pandemic. And I remember the countdown to the numbers were creeping up everywhere. You know, there were boats docking in California that we knew had people infected with this thing. And one day it was an epidemic, and the next day it was a pandemic. And then I mean, it's like this whole domino thing that we all experienced together. And so giving up the 2020 year I expected has been challenging for me. I'm sure it has been for the rest of y'all. But as I watched the education community at every single level, I mean, that's our lane, that's my lane, but at every single level, gasp, pause, take 2 weeks to, to stay home under order, but put in place plans to keep our some wholeness in our structures. I was just truly stunned, and I think we share a quality. I don't know about the rest of you, but for me, the quality is I can't handle more than about this much despair before I have to start acting. Action for me is, maybe it's a form of denial, but it is for me the way in which I process. This is really frightening, and I have no idea how we're going to get through, but where do we put our shoulder to the wheel? And I have seen that at every single level. I think of this community in education as first responders, really. And I'm terribly moved by that energy that kind of defines the educational workforce. And certainly they were concerned about student success and not missing the steps that they needed, these students. But the level of just deep, profound care that educators felt and expressed and tried to find ways to engage for their students was just, I mean, it's been a moment of fear, but a moment of amazement as well. And I'm so grateful for that, echoing Marquita and your sense of, you have a better sense of how this worked in the systems of higher education, but just taking a step back, it's been truly amazing. So, in terms of the actions that the commission could take, we found ourselves, all of us did, in a situation where we could neither graduate candidates and credential them, nor admit them. This was a terrible moment. What are we going to do? We had to do something. And, the governor's office, I don't know if you've signed up to their webpage, but I get 10 to 15 tweets a day from the governor's office. That's how active they've been. It's been extraordinary. But the fact that we were able to put the case before the governor and his administration, that this was a real crisis for our workforce, for our students, for what we were trying to do, that they released an executive order for us in June that allowed us to complete candidates and allowed us to admit candidates by postponing. We postponed the TPA and the APA, the performance assessments required for the preliminary credential, the RECA required for preliminary credentials, not for special ed, but for gen ed and for ed admin. Postponing all of that to induction was a bold move. And it presumes that induction is ready to absorb that. And we knew there was some readiness, but it was like putting them on a life raft. We can get you a preliminary credential and we can get you into practice, and we will collect ourselves and connect up with you at that point and help you get finished. Allowing the CBEST and the CSET to be postponed instead of admission requirements, they became completion requirements. What we're hearing now is that across the board, we're hearing that there are increases in enrollment in teacher education, which we think is a result to some extent of relieving some of these pain points for admission. And I have a nagging concern that comes up for me every time I hear about that. One is, great, we're going to get more people into teaching, but that's if we can get them out, right? We have to be cognizant within our system of preparation, that we've admitted people who haven't crossed a barrier that is a real barrier for many people, and whatever additional support we can provide, we really need to do so. This professional leadership group that Terry Clark organized and Marquita mentioned, became for us a sounding board. What are you hearing from within your systems? Where are the pressure points and what can we do? So the commission in midsummer, following that work, took action in June to find ways to determine, allow programs to determine that their candidates had sufficient clinical practice that they could recommend them for the preliminary credential, to postpone things that we could, to extend things that we could, with the notion that, we've got induction, we've got more time before the clear credential. And so in July, we released this extensive list of flexibilities that were really informed by all of you and by the community of practice in preparation. So between the executive order and those flexibilities, we were ready, I think, to finish off last year and try to get ready for whatever was going to be coming in the next school year. Well, we're in it now. We're 10 weeks or so into the new school year. And we don't have the benefit of a workforce that we spent 3/4 of the year training before we got them a preliminary credential. You have admitted people into preparation that are struggling to get the clinical practice that they need in order to develop. This is a clinical preparation program, and it can't, to my way of thinking, it can't be anything other than that. And yet getting access within the variable circumstances that we find our schools is really challenging. And we're hearing more and more about that. To support this community, we put together this letter directed to superintendents for school districts and counties, deans of education, and directors of induction programs as the primary audience, signed by the chair of our commission, Tina Sloan, the president of the State Board of Education, Linda Darling Hammond, and the state superintendent of public instruction, Tony Thurmond. And this letter sets forth, I hope you've seen it. If you haven't seen it, we'll definitely put the link in your chat line so you can. It sets forth the criticality of partnership between preparation and schooling. And if we don't do that, we are at risk of really interrupting our pipeline, because we can't get our people prepared, our teachers prepared, if they can't get some access to clinical. And moreover, and equally important, schools miss a huge opportunity to bring this resource in, to stand side by side with teachers who are trying to figure out every single day how they're going to make it happen. So the extra hands to the wheel argument and the need to keep a pipeline moving forward argument are the big organizers for this letter that we sent out. And it includes also some pinch points that are not unimportant. Induction is expected to step up in ways that they haven't been expected to step up for a while, not just in their own practice, but in getting ready to take in this workforce that wasn't quite done, right? And to help them get done with the various things they need to get done. So we need to make sure induction gets the support and strength that it needs from the state systems. And we need to make sure that our candidates have access to the online platforms and the space and that they need to develop their practice this year. But we are hearing, we've been listening this week to the field supervisors and others about, people who have had to make 40 calls to place one student teacher, and how challenging that is, right? So we have pulled our ex officios together again. That's Marquita Greenough-Shire, Andrew Wall from Redlands in the private AICCU group, Anne Marie Francois from UCLA, to brainstorm so how are we going to deal with this? We're halfway through the fall semester for people who are on this academic year. And what happens if we can't get the 600 hours that we need? What are we going to do? Last year, we had the benefit of that cohort of candidates receiving, 80% of the clinical support and supervision they were going to get. This year, we don't know that. So what can we do? And there are a number of things we can do. We can wring our hands, and really we can do that for about 5, maybe 10 minutes, because then we've got to pick ourselves back up and get right back to innovating. What are the ways in which we can innovate in this moment? To quote Gloria Ladson-Billings, we aren't going back. We're going forward. So how are we going to go forward? And so there are some very interesting ideas emerging in response to that question. You know, how could we, for instance, I'm just going to throw this one out, or maybe let me pitch this back to you, Marquita. Why don't you pitch it? You articulated it earlier. This is the time to innovate. I'm going to toss it back to Marquita, and I think we'd like to also, invite you to put your ideas on the table and be ready for a longer engagement around these questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary. While you were talking, I put a link to the collaboration letter in the chat box. To my mind, this is an unprecedented letter from the state education leaders, which I think demonstrates what a critical point we're at again. And I agree with Mary that we're not going backwards, we're going forward. And this is not the time to admire the problem. As my colleague Mary Falvey always used to tell me, this is a time to innovate and reimagine what that first year of induction would look like for this cohort of students who, as Mary said, are not going to probably get those 600 hours. So what kinds of support can we as a community think about? And so, as Mary said, she brought together the IHE leads and her team, and we thought about this this issue and are reaching out to a number of our colleagues over the next couple of weeks to help us reimagine what induction might look like. And we had this idea of what would a residency look like at the end of a candidate's preparation, that is during their induction. We're all familiar with the outstanding residency programs we have across the state that were funded by the legislature a couple of years ago. But what would be a residency-like induction program? What would that mean for IHE faculty and supports? What would that mean for LEA faculty and supports? So this is what we're thinking right now. And we have about 10 minutes or so left in this section. And I really, Mary and I really invite your thinking on this idea or your reflections on what we did in the spring and the pivot we made. We very much would like to hear from you. So with that, I think we'll open it up, Mary, and and I'll take notes. And
ready.
Yeah, raise your hand and so I can see you and share your thoughts, please.
Or your questions.
Or your questions, yeah. I can only see half of you at one time, so.
You can also utilize the chat if you don't want to unmute yourself.
I'm going to be a good teacher and engage in wait time right now.
So, hi, my name's Alyssa. I do have a question kind of in some of the preparation and how student teachers are being prepared right now. I'm thinking of, most of our teachers are teaching virtually. So in our preparation program, and even in the program, are we teaching them any of the platforms? Are they needing to utilize, create lesson plans in Google Classroom, in, Schoology, or any of those types of technology pieces?
I think yes, but Elisa, before you mute yourself, tell me where you're from. What?
So I am with the Thompson Policy Institute with Chapman University.
Okay.
So I work also with the Thompson Autism Center, but prior to that, I was working in a school district as a district administrator. So
okay, thank you. So I I think, and I'll look at my faculty colleagues who are joining us, that our candidates are using a variety of platforms and are having to, yes, design lesson plans that can be delivered. I see people shaking their heads. So I think our candidates are learning some new skills and some new strategies that they're gonna stay with them moving forward. Right? That's my sense.
Yep.
As we move forward in exploring what induction might look like next year, how does that impact, how can we consider how that impacts the Ed TPA, Cal TPA this year? I mean, we put a lot of emphasis on working with our candidates on getting ready for the Ed TPA.
Right.
We could have somebody with not enough hours who has the Ed TPA. And what does that look like for induction?
Right.
I think that's an interesting question, Eric, and I appreciate it. I think, Tina Sloan, if you haven't met her, you really should have a conversation with her. She and I, and the others we've been collaborating with, have had long conversations about this, and believe that these things don't necessarily substitute for nor cancel one another out. Her belief is that every candidate who enrolls in a teacher preparation program deserves the full scope of supervised clinical practice. Else, why do we do it? Assigning hours to it may make it seem trivial, but it actually wasn't. At the time, we had a range across our institutions of 40 hours of clinical practice up to 1,200 hours of clinical practice, and a lot of uncertainty about how well prepared candidates were. The commission put a stake in the ground around, we need to make sure that everybody gets a minimum amount of supervision in clinical practice in order for them to achieve the depth of knowledge that makes them ready to begin practice. That's the theory of action. And the performance assessment goes alongside that. It organizes some of that clinical practice, no question about it. It may or may not take 600 hours, depending on who you talk to. It may or may not. But the TPA is a slightly different thing. It's a confirmation that a candidate has demonstrated proficiency, readiness to begin around a number of the important performance expectations the state has adopted. So we see these things as converging and not replacing, but part of rich teacher preparation, at least at the commission table. That's how we're talking about it.
Audrey, I'm seeing a couple of comments in the chat box. One is that somebody is a K-12 administrator and they have master teachers trying to master distance learning themselves and expected to set the example for student teachers. And what I hear from my colleagues is exactly the same thing, and that our student teachers are more skilled, more experienced, more comfortable, and so therefore really have a contribution to make in this new environment we find ourselves in.
Related to that, just a quick hit, Audrey Gomez, I think you organized one of the workshops, one of the webinars that we did was focused on the use of a variety of platforms for UDL.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. And
okay,
you attended it. It was using tech tools to universally design distance learning. Mm-hmm. And if you're interested in it, you can visit our website, inclusioncalifornia.org. And there's the Padlet, and you can also view the entire presentation, and actually Orange County Department of Education put on that training. But Mary, go ahead. I know you attended that.
No, I just wanted to say that the answer was yes, and Marquita gave it. There are lots of different things being used. And if you want to see what a range might look like, you should go check this site out. It blew my mind and it humbled me, and it made me realize I'm no longer, I'm getting older. Sorry, that's a fact.
You and me both, Mary.
Cutting edge is way out there, and I'm not on it.
There are some great ideas that are popping up in the chat box. Audrey, are we going to be able to capture these and save these?
Yeah,
Great.
I'll go ahead and make sure that we save everything in the chat box.
Okay. We only have
What I wanted to say, my name is Manuel Ponce, and I'm a part-time instructor at Cal State LA with the Educational Administration program. The focus, I think, given the situation we're in, I think it's important for, like, say, example, the master teacher, the student teacher, that we look at the situation and say, well, what is the learning that needs to happen here? Because I think if we try to, look back and say, well, a year ago we would, include all of these things in our learning. I think it's really important to be focused in what we want, what our objectives are as master teacher, student teacher. Obviously, it's important to make sure that it meets the standards and so on and so forth. But that we become more laser focused in the work that we do, so that people don't feel overwhelmed by all the stuff, that they're having to do, and all the different responsibilities that the platform has laid on individuals. So I think being more cognizant of how we dialogue and have our people dialogue around what do we want our learning to look like and sound like, at the end of the quarter, in the semester, so that we're not feeling like we didn't meet our expectation, but we feel good about ourselves, we feel good about our work. Because we don't want this pandemic to put a damper on things. We want come out of this, having done some good work. And I think limiting our and it's not limiting our focus or scope, it's just being mindful of what the constraints, what they are.
Manuel, thank you. Thank you so much for your thoughts. And in some ways, you're going to, and I see Amy had a comment or a question, but in some ways, what you just said is a good segue to the conversation that our colleagues related to the leadership group are going to be having, because I think the role of school administrators is absolutely critical in helping us to structure and support our candidates and our master teachers so that we can get on the other side of this.
Right.
Amy, I think we're going to let you have the last word before we get out into breakout rooms.
Well, I just wanted to expand a little bit on what Manuel was saying, and also what I had written in the chat about defining the skills that our teachers need in order to support students during distance learning and reopening, because I think there's going to be some unique skills related to reopening also. And I think what we're trying to do right now, at least I supervise student teachers, is we're trying to make the existing TPEs fit within what they're doing now, and which is sometimes a stretch, and we're grateful for the flexibility to do it. But I think what we're learning is that there are some unique skills that are critical and that some of our candidates are really demonstrating very beautifully. But we don't have a way to reflect those now when it comes to kind of evaluating our student teachers, our interns, and our induction candidates. And, I hate to be the one to suggest anything related to revising TPEs, but I feel like we need some way to, to capture what these new skills are, because I think that they will. I mean, going into the breakout rooms, I think that there will be some of these skills that will stay with us for some time, and that might be beneficial to supporting students, K through 12 students. And so I hope that there's work being done to kind of capture what these skills are and find a way to embed these in a more sustainable way in our programs.
There's certainly an acknowledgement that it's essential that we do that. But I think we're going to need to pull people like you and others together to help us articulate what those are. And reviewing the TPEs may seem like it's a little soon, because last time was 2016, But, you know, we've got at least 2 very big pandemics that we're experiencing, very big movements that I think demand that we take a look at that knowledge and skill base and performance based expectations to make sure we've captured the kind of adaptability that we've seen just you know, emerge in this moment, and to move from it emerging for some but not all into what should every teacher know and be able to do in order to pivot in these ways. And it's a 360-degree thing. It's so thank you for bringing that up, Amy. I really appreciate hearing that. I'm glad it was you and not me that said it too. So.
Yeah.
Well,
Maybe I should take it back.
I know Audrey wants us to move into breakout rooms, but let me just end with something that Mary said that I want to just make sure that we highlight. We've talked about the COVID-19 pandemic, but we've been under twin pandemics for the last 6 months. And what the COVID-19 pandemic did was shed this harsh light on systemic inequities in schools. And so the commission, I can say because I'm a commissioner, is committed to using this moment, using this inflection point to really reimagine what we're doing in educator preparation. And we're going to come back to all of you and rely on you for the ideas and the suggestions that you have as we move forward in this moment. So I thank you on behalf of Mary and myself, and we're going to turn it back to Audrey, who's going to magically disperse us, right?
He's the wizard.
Yeah, I am going to go, thank you. Put you all in breakout groups, and if you find yourself in a wrong breakout group or you want to switch, just come back to the main room and I will make that happen. But I think I have everyone down in the correct